This is All Ears. I'm Everett Hopfner. Here's the story. I'm a pianist. For at least the last 10 years, I've been determined to work as hard as I can and surround myself with the right people to build a career as a professional musician. This has led me to adventures I could have only dreamed of as a child growing up in rural Manitoba. Music has opened my horizons. I've been able to travel and perform in 9 countries and pursue my education in Canada and Germany. Most importantly, I've become part of a thriving, interconnected network of students, teachers, instrumentalists, composers, researchers, philanthropists, and supporters. We are bound by our love of music, our desire to see new artistic creations come to life, and our passion for performing and communicating across cultural, generational, and disciplinary boundaries. This show is, in some ways, my attempt to stay connected. Each episode, I'll bring you a conversation with someone who inspires me. These are friends and musical collaborators who are making a real difference in their communities, people applying their craft in new and interesting directions. So thank you for joining me on this little journey. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I hope it will introduce you to a bunch of people you'll appreciate as much as I do. Okay, let's go. Brandon, Manitoba. A small city on the Canadian prairie surrounded by miles and miles of not very much. It's perhaps not the most obvious location for a music school, but it actually works, and it's all because of the people who make it happen. Manitoba winters are long, cold, and depressing. If you're a young musician, this is an ideal opportunity to embrace the situation and spend the time honing your craft. During my time as a student in Brandon, I could wander into the music building at any time of the day, or night for that matter, and encounter a group of jazz majors jamming together. More often than not, Ashley Au was among them. She's a bassist, and a really good one. Ashley's continuous collaborations have expanded her sound, technique, and style into many unexpected directions. Now based in Winnipeg, Ashley Au is much in demand for gigging, subbing, touring, recording, and teaching. Here's our conversation. Well, let's start here. How did you end up with a bass in your hands?
With a bass in my hands. It's quite a funny story, actually. I was in high school. I was playing clarinet, and I really wanted to go on the band trip to the Brandon Jazz Festival, because a lot of my friends were in the jazz band, and I thought, I want to go on a bus trip and stay overnight in a town that I've never been in before. So I asked my director, I was like, hey, I want to play in the jazz band. What can I play? I don't really want to play clarinet. Like, I heard some Benny Goodman and it was kind of weird. I don't know. So, what can I do? And he's like, well, you could play bass. We need a bass player. And I was like, cool. And he gave me an electric bass to take home over the summer. And then I figured it out and came back and was like, let's go on band trips.
I love the fact that for a young kid in Winnipeg, the prospect of spending a night in Brandon, the exotic locale, a vast 200 kilometers down the Trans-Canada Highway, is enough of an incentive to learn a whole new instrument. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I must have been like 14 or something. 14 or 15.
And then years later, you actually ended up in Brandon, not only as a band trip, but actually as a place of residence and of study for quite a while.
Yeah, 5 years.
How did that decision come about?
Well, let's see, I was looking into different music programs. For a while, I was thinking of going into either physics or business school. And my parents were always pushing Asian parents business school.
Sure.
So I thought, I'll consider it. And then I thought, I still want to play music. So I auditioned at the University of Manitoba. And I got in, and I was like, well, this is cool. But I knew that if I went to Brandon University, I would get to study with Gilles Fournier, who was like my bass hero in Winnipeg for the longest time. And then I auditioned and got in and thought, all right, ready. I'm ready for a 5-year band trip. Let's do it.
And our time in Brandon overlapped. We were there at the same time as students. And
Yeah.
my perspective was that somewhere deep in the bowels of the music building was this fascinating sort of chemical laboratory where by far the most creative output was coming from. So what was that? What was it like to be in that kind of basement jazz cauldron while you were there?
It was great. I developed a coffee addiction. I stayed up really late every night, slept into through theory classes in the morning. It was great though. I got to meet a lot of great musicians from various backgrounds. Got to play a lot of music that wasn't traditionally jazz. I remember in my first year we put together a quartet. We spent a couple months just playing traditional klezmer music and tango music. And that was just the greatest. I don't know. It's really exciting. There's a lot of funk bands that came up through the jazz program there. A lot of people were listening to a lot of the same stuff that I grew up listening to, which I hadn't found in my younger years in university. In high school, everybody was listening to Led Zeppelin, like classic rock, and I get that. That was cool. But I grew up listening to a lot of soul, funk, and like early hip hop, and so I feel like I connected with those folks on that level too. And there's, I think, with jazz as a, I guess, as a style of music, as a culture, there's an aspect of interpreting current popular musics. So everybody's always listening to what's new and like trying to find a way to like pull it into the jazz lexicon.
And I think the other thing I saw happening too is because it's a small program in Brandon, just from a point of necessity, you end up playing for and playing with a lot of your colleagues.
Absolutely, absolutely. In my first year, I was playing like third, fourth year recitals, like all this hard repertoire that I was like not really ready to do, but it was a great experience and it really pushes you.
When you do, I'm sure like when you do your own recital in the jazz program, you're kind of taking the artistic control of that. So when you're
Absolutely.
playing for other people, you need to kind of go along with their world, and so you get pulled into, several different directions as you're going to each of the other students and playing for them.
Definitely.
What does that teach you about how you want to lead a group?
Well, I didn't start leading groups until a few years into just being a side player, and I mean, it teaches you so much. Just sitting on the sidelines, quietly looking through the music. It teaches you how to write charts in an efficient way, so that there aren't too many page turns or whatever. You learn different ways to delegate roles and ideas to musicians and try to get your point across because you come across some musicians who are really great at that, but maybe they're not so great at the scheduling side of things. Like there's so many aspects to running a group. Uh, Preparing the repertoire yourself, preparing the actual charts to give out to the people, organizing schedules, picking a room, figuring out rehearsal times, figuring out like some sort of compensation for the playing because I mean they're your friends but they're also your colleagues and you're trying to emulate, especially in the school setting, you're trying to emulate the outside world like okay, we have this much time in this space, we got to make it work. I don't want to make these people do more than they have to because I don't have my shit together. Like that's it. I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider
Sure.
um, when it comes to putting together your own work, and it's great to be a side player because you learn learn all the little things that matter.
So you get out of school, you have to go back into the real world. What was that transition like for you when you left Brandon?
When I left, I was really I felt ready to leave, and there was you always get that feeling of like nostalgia and a little bit of like bittersweet whatever thinking back to it. It was a great time.
Sure.
My first year away from school was a big slap in the face, I guess. I moved back to Winnipeg. I generally hadn't been doing too much playing in Winnipeg because I was always able to find work in Brandon during the summers, and I hadn't made the connections like that a lot of the students at the University of Manitoba may have made playing with each other and also other people in the city, having all those venues available and being able to do that kind of side work while they were in school. But yeah, I came into town and I had to start going to jam sessions and meeting people again. Had to pick up a job that was not arts related, which was just upsetting. Working long hours, trying to find bands to play with that I liked playing with. I guess it was easier for me than some other folks just because of the instrument I play.
Sure.
Bass players are always in demand.
And now, a few years later, you've found that work. You've got a lot of gigs going on. You're working with a lot of different groups in a lot of different musical styles with a lot of different people. So,
Yeah.
since you've got that all going on, why don't we just like run through a few of these projects you're doing right now, and if you can just describe to me what style of music it is, and maybe a little bit about the people you're playing with.
Cool. Yeah.
So let's start with Odana.
Odana actually is a indie folk rock quartet, and it's comprised of myself, Brady Allard, Mike Fox, and Dan Britton, who were all people that I met while doing my degree in Brandon. But we never really played together as an ensemble. I didn't even get to know Mike, really, until I moved to Winnipeg and he moved to Winnipeg. So that was all kind of strange how it came together. It was like a nice reunion. And I've been playing with them since, I guess, the top of the year, so.
And you've just put out an EP.
Yeah, Blood and Sour Mash. It's great.
How about Carly Dow?
Carly Dow. Carly Dow is a singer-songwriter based in Winnipeg, although she grew up in the Riding Mountain National Park kind of area. I met her playing with this Roma-inspired feminist punk band called Baka, and she's the guitar player for them. And yeah, we linked up after a summer of playing, and we just finished recording an album the top of September. Right now it's still in kind of post-production. I've been listening to the mixes that have been posted, and they're sounding really good. I'm also playing with Matt Filopoulos on guitar and Daniel Burtnick on drums with Carly Dow and the whole damn band. And yeah, we've been playing the festival circuit this past summer, a lot of gigs in Winnipeg, and I don't know, I'm really happy to be working with her. She's kind of like a roots folk, but it's very soulful. So I mean, there's like this touch of almost Etta James to her delivery, which I really like.
Bud Gordon and the God Awful Gospel?
This is really funny. Bud Gordon is a pseudonym for Brett Nelson, and he's a songwriter that came out of Alberta. I believe he's from Medicine Hat. He moved to Winnipeg to do a archaeology degree at the University of Manitoba, and I met him at a networking event for freelancers called The Art of Managing Your Career, and that event was put on by ACI Manitoba, which is the Arts and Cultural Industries Association of Manitoba. It's the sector council for arts and culture, and that organization provides a lot of professional development type programming for freelancers. So like crowdfunding, workshops, grant writing, managing your finances, doing your taxes, whatever. And I met him there. He gave me a call, and we sat down together, played a few tracks, and he's a phenomenal songwriter. Like, it's absolutely astounding. He writes really great chord changes. His lyrics are just absolutely poetic. And he's a great guitar player too. So I've been working with him a bit, and then I kind of roped in some friends from Carly's band, and then we became the God Awful Gospel.
I love the name. I love the name. And how about Super Duty Tough Work?
Super Duty Tough Work. This band collective ensemble is one that I'm super excited to be playing in. It's fronted by drummer Brendan Kinley, although he doesn't play drums in this ensemble. He's a MC, and the instrumentation is full rhythm section, guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, percussion, usually a couple horn players, and scratch DJ. So It's primarily hip hop, but it has that live kind of jazz element to it. Most of the players are trained. They come out of either Brown University or University of Manitoba. It has this live jazz kind of feel to it, similar to like a Tribe Called Quest or that early kind of hip hop where most of what was sampled came from early jazz funk records. I'm super excited about playing with these guys. It's a collective, so essentially there are two full rhythm sections that are involved, but because all the players are involved in tons of other projects, in order to get everyone together, it's kind of impossible. So whoever's available for a particular date usually ends up playing it, and yeah, it's really nice. A lot of cool repertoire.
So just going through what we've already talked about, you have a degree in jazz, you play in a hip hop group, you play in a country folk group, you play in an indie folk group, you play in a folk roots group. These are not all the same.
No.
How do you develop the interest in all of those musical styles and then develop the skills to play them?
I think the interest, at least with hip hop, it's always been an interest of mine. And with indie, folk, rock, anything that's kind of roots related, I almost feel like if you're from Manitoba, you have an ear for it because it's just something that you hear all the time. Manitoba, especially with folk, it's Neil Young's fault really that everybody plays folk out here. But everyone has an ear for it, and there's something. It might have to do with like Métis populations here too, in that traditional fiddling. But there's a bluegrass tradition that runs through Manitoba, and there's tons and tons of great roots musicians that play at all sorts of live events. When you're, I don't know, when you're a kid and you go to like Canada Day, you'll hear, I don't know, Buffy St. Marie, or you'll hear the Brothers Landreth, which is I don't know if you've checked them out, but they're really taking off in Winnipeg. There's a really strong community here, so it's hard not to get sucked into it. Great players, great people, and it's a real community where people are supporting each other's endeavors, and there's a lot of cross collaboration between projects, a lot of mutual respect. So it's hard not to want to be a part of it.
Sure. And you mentioned some summer festivals earlier. I saw you were at the Real Love Festival, the Rainbow Trout Festival, and the Shine On Festival this summer.
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, I've been to the Winnipeg Folk Festival a lot. When you go, and Regina Folk Festival and these kind of things, where you just see there'll be like workshop mornings or workshop performances where certain members from each of the bands will come on stage and they'll just kind of either play on a theme, or they'll play all together and they'll jam together, or they'll just they'll do something different than what they usually do in their main act. So
Yeah, definitely.
what kind of experiences have you had in this kind of a festival tradition, and what do you learn from that?
Well, let's see. At the Shine On Festival, this past year, I had participated in a morning workshop. It was kind of like a weird breakfast workshop. They had a separate stage by this area where concessions and things were sold, and everybody would wake up really groggy and go there and get a cup of coffee in the morning. So it was a lot of, it was like a gospel traditional kind of hour. So a lot of traditional bluegrass music, a lot of traditional country, and gospel tracks. It was a lot of repertoire also that I didn't know at all. So I sat down and just had to listen to the singer go through it once and then pick up the changes and play along. And yeah, it's a really great experience. And you meet so many good people at festivals in terms of other performers, and also you see the same faces at every festival, especially these smaller festivals. There's a big community of festival goers in Manitoba. I just recently played at Soup Stock, which is this really interesting festival. It's really new. I think they had their first one last year, so this is the second Soup Stock, and it took place south of the city on someone's private property, and it's a festival of music and soup. So they had kind of a soup cook-off and tons of bands playing for 3 days, and you would pay your fee and you listen to this music and eat a bunch of soup. and you'd camp outside.
That sounds ideal.
It's really ideal because it's pretty cold now. It's kind of too cold to be camping, but there's so much soup. You can't. It really just balances it out.
Do the musicians also get the soup?
I had so much soup. It was really good.
I'm so glad. Oh man. Now you're also doing some writing?
Yeah, I'm doing some writing with therooster.ca, which is a small online magazine that covers arts and culture and fashion lifestyle in central and western Canada. Each major city has representatives, contributors that cover the scenes within that city. What I do there is I primarily do album reviews, artist interviews, and concert reviews.
Ashley, we do a segment of this podcast in honor of the great Mr. Rogers, where we just take a minute to thank some of the people who have helped us get to this point in our training or our careers. Can you tell me about somebody who's helped you along the way?
Probably Brian Zimmerman. He's kind of been a recurring character in my musical career, and we still meet like every couple of months for lunch every once in a while. But he was the one who told me I could play bass instead of clarinet in band. And then he was the one who got me all the information I needed to study bass further, gave me a list of all the names. He encouraged me to tell my parents that I wanted to play music for a living, even though I was like terrified and was probably just going to become a physicist instead. I don't know. And he drove me to Brandon for my audition, introduced me to Ron Carter, one of my favorite bassists. And he was the one who told me, just try it out, and if you don't like it, you can always, school is always waiting for you to do something else. So
just so I'm clear, was he a band teacher in high school, or how?
Yeah, he was a band teacher. He was the jazz band director.
At the school you went to?
Yeah, the school I went to, and he was always like really encouraging, but he never really pushed anything. He just kind of let you come across the material and ask the questions, which is what a great pedagogue is. I mean, they just facilitate your own discovery of your arts practice.
And that's one thing I always wonder when we say, oh, he doesn't force it on you. But I wonder how much of this facilitation is really just, I'm going to strategically place these things in front of you, and you will follow my trail like Hansel and Gretel in the woods. And eventually...
That's probably a lot more of what it is. Because I feel like in my teaching, I try to do that. I'm like, oh yeah, you like that? You know, you'd probably really like the Pixies. Here, just take this album home.
How can people learn more about you and follow your activities?
Well, people can find me on my website, ashleyau.com. Also, follow me on Twitter. AshleyAuMusic is my Twitter handle. You can find me on Facebook. They can look up any of these great bands that I endorse because they have great songwriters. I don't know. I can't get over how great these people are, and I'm feeling very very privileged to get to work with them.
And I'll make sure to put links to all of those things on the site. Thank you so much, not only for all your time, but for, this is something kind of new and a bit weird and strange, but I really appreciate you being so generous and wonderful about this.
Anytime.
Well, that's it for this episode of All Ears. Thanks for listening. New episodes are released twice a month on my website, everetthopfner.com, and on iTunes. You can follow me and the show on Twitter at evhopf, EVHOPF. Do you have questions? Feedback? Feel like sharing your story as a guest on All Ears? Go to everetthopfner.com and click on the contact page. If you like All Ears, recommend it.